The dense pine forests of the Ardennes still whisper about December 1944. Even today, if you walk the old logging trails near the Belgian-German border, you can find rusted shell casings, broken mess kits, and the occasional faded aluminum canteen half buried in the leaf litter. These are the quiet scars of the Battle of the Bulge, the last great German offensive in the West. What most people don't know is that some of those scars are not just physical. In the autumn of 2023, the Bundeswehr quietly reopened a long-abandoned training compound on the edge of the Eifel National Park, about 12 kilometers northeast of Bitburg. The site had been closed since 1994. Before that, it had been a NATO facility. Before that, during the war, it had been a Wehrmacht replacement and transit barracks codenamed Lager Eifelblick. Thousands of soldiers passed through those pine-shrouded bunkers and wooden barracks blocks on their way to the front in late 1944. Most made it no further than the Hürtgen Forest or the snow-choked roads around Bastogne. But a handful of men who survived the Ardennes offensive came back to that same camp in the final weeks of the war, wounded, frostbitten, shell-shocked, and were billeted in the very barracks that now stand empty again. According to recently declassified Bundeswehr internal memos and several first-hand accounts collected by military historians and paranormal researchers, something began to happen in those barracks during the winter of 1944-45. Something that made even hardened veterans from the Eastern Front refuse night guard duty. They said something followed them back from the snowfields. Something that did not die when the men who carried it home did. In 2023, when the Bundeswehr returned to the site for modern training exercises, the old stories resurfaced. Only this time, they were no longer just campfire tales whispered among old Lancers. Serving soldiers started reporting the same things their grandfathers had. Doors opening by themselves. Footsteps in empty corridors. A voice calling out names that belonged to men who had been dead for 78 years. And always, always, the same smell. Wet pine needles, cordite, and something metallic, like blood frozen on steel. Tonight, we're going to hear from the men who walked those halls in 1944, and from the Bundeswehr soldiers who walked them again in 2023. Chapter 1. The first one's back. My name is Obergefreiter Karl-Heinz Vogel. In December 1944, I was 22 years old and already felt like I had lived a lifetime. I had fought with the 116th Panzer Division from the beaches of Normandy through the hell of the retreat across France. By the time we were pulled back to the Eifel for refitting before the big Ardennes offensive, I was one of the few left who still answered to my own name. We reached Lager Eifelblick on the night of December 12th. Snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes that clung to the pine branches and turned the entire camp into a silent, white world. The barracks were old stone and timber buildings from the 1930s, first built for the Reichsarbeitsdienst and later taken over by the Wehrmacht. They smelled of damp wood, mildew, and the faint chemical stink of field kitchens that had been running nonstop for weeks. Our company was billeted in Block 7, two long, low buildings connected by a covered wooden walkway. We were down to 43 men from an original strength of 180. The rest were dead, captured, or missing somewhere between Falaise and the Seine. The survivors moved like shadows, speaking only when necessary. That first night I drew interior guard duty. 2 hours on, 4 hours off. Simple enough. The corridor between the two wings of Block 7 was narrow, lit by a single 40-watt bulb at the far end. My boots echoed on the pine floorboards. The air was cold enough to see my breath. Around 0230, I was halfway down the corridor when I heard it. Not footsteps. More like the sound of wet wool dragging across wood. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the far end, where there was nothing but a locked storeroom door. I stopped. The dragging stopped. I called out, "Wer da?" No answer. I took 3 steps forward. The dragging started again, closer this time. I raised my MP40, safety off, finger on the trigger. Who's there? The dragging stopped right in front of me. I could smell it now. Wet pine needles, cordite, and something sour, like old blood frozen on steel. Then a voice, low, cracked, almost whispering, came from the darkness ahead. "Gib mir. Mein Herrn Zurich." I froze. I knew that voice. It was Gefreiter Paul Lehmann, my loader in the Panther during the retreat from Caen. On August 7th, we had been hit by a typhoon. The turret took a 20mm round. Paul was standing in the commander's hatch when it happened. The explosion tore his right hand off at the wrist. He bled out in my arms before we could get him to an aid station. I buried what was left of him in a shell crater near Mortain. I stood there in the corridor with my submachine gun shaking in my hands, listening to a dead man ask for his hand back. The bulb flickered once and went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I turned and ran. I burst into the main bunk room, chest heaving. Several men sat up in their bunks, startled. One of them, Underoffizier Braun, grabbed my arm. "What is it, Vogel?" I couldn't speak at first. My throat was dry. Finally, I managed. "There's something in the corridor." Braun looked at me for a long moment. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was crazy. He just nodded slowly. "I know," he said quietly. "We've all heard it." He didn't ask for details. No one did. They simply lay back down and pulled their blankets tighter. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bunk with my back against the wall, MP40 across my knees, staring at the door. The dragging sound never came again that night, but the smell lingered, faint but unmistakable. Wet pine, cordite, blood. In the morning I reported for duty as if nothing had happened. I told no one what I'd heard. I thought maybe I was losing my mind from fatigue, frostbite, and too many months of watching friends die. But I wasn't the only one. Over the next few nights, other men started reporting the same thing. A dragging sound in the corridor. A voice asking for its hand. The smell that followed. We never spoke about it openly. We didn't have to. Everyone knew what it was. Paul Lehman had come back, and he was looking for the hand we had left behind in France. I never stood guard alone in that corridor again. None of us did. We learned quickly that some things are better faced in pairs, or not at all. Chapter 2. The smell of the snow. My name is Gefreiter Hansweber. I was with the 116th Panzer Division, Replacement Battalion. I arrived at Lager Eifelblick on December 15, 1944, just 3 days after Vogel's company got there. I had come straight from a training depot in Thuringia. Fresh uniform, fresh rifle, fresh fear. The camp looked like every other replacement depot I had seen. Pine trees crowding in close, snow piled against the barracks walls, and the constant smell of wood smoke from the stoves. But there was something else in the air, something that didn't belong. We called it the snow smell. It didn't come every night, but when it did, it filled the entire barracks like a cold front rolling in. You could be lying on your bunk, half asleep, and suddenly the room would change. The air turned sharp and clean, heavy with pine needles, like standing in the middle of a frozen forest at 0300. Then the cordite. Then the blood. Always the blood. The first time I noticed it was December 18th. We had just finished a 20-kilometer road march in full winter gear, boots soaked, shoulders raw from the straps. Everyone was exhausted. I was on the top bunk nearest the window in Block 7. Around 0100, I woke up because the room felt wrong. I opened my eyes and saw my own breath hanging in the air like cigarette smoke. The stove had been banked hours earlier. It should have been warm. Instead, the temperature had dropped hard. I sat up. The smell hit me full force. I looked down at the bunk below me. Feldwebel Braun was lying there, or I thought he was asleep. His eyes were open, staring straight up at me. He wasn't blinking. "Hans," he whispered. "Do you smell that?" Before I could answer, the window rattled, hard, like someone had slammed a fist against the outside. There was no wind. The snow was falling straight down, silent and heavy. Braun sat up slowly. His face was pale. He whispered, "It's them." "Who?" I asked. "The ones we left in the snow." He didn't explain. He just stared at the window like he expected it to shatter. The smell grew stronger. I could taste it now, metallic, like licking a battery. My stomach turned. The rattling stopped. The room went quiet again, but the cold stayed. Braun lay back down without another word. I didn't sleep after that. I lay there listening to the silence, waiting for the next sound. The next morning, Braun reported to the infirmary. He told the doctor he couldn't breathe in the barracks anymore. They kept him there for 3 days, then sent him back to us. He never explained what he had seen or heard. He just stopped talking much at all. By Christmas Eve, half the men in Block 7 were sleeping in the mess hall or the motor pool, anywhere but their own bunks. No one wanted to be alone when the snow smell came. One night, around 0300, I woke up again. The smell was back, stronger than before. This time it came with sound. A low, wet scraping, like someone dragging a body across the floor outside the window. I got up and went to the glass. I wiped the frost away with my sleeve. There was nothing, just snow. But the footprints were there, fresh boot prints, size 44, leading from the tree line straight to our window. They stopped right below the sill, as if whoever made them had stood there looking in. I backed away. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't tell anyone that night. I didn't need to. The next morning the tracks were gone, melted or covered by fresh snow. But the men who had seen them knew. We started leaving the lights on all night. We didn't care if the fuel ran low. We didn't care if the officers complained. We just didn't want to be in the dark when it came. Sometimes the smell would pass through the room like a wave. You could track its path by watching the men's faces. One bunk would tense up, then the next, then the next. No one spoke. We just waited for it to move on. And it always did, eventually. But it always came back. We began to understand something that winter. The snow smell wasn't just a smell. It was a memory. A memory that didn't belong to any one man. It belonged to all of us. And it was looking for something or someone. We never found out what. But we knew better than to ask. Chapter 3. The names on the wall. My name is Unteroffizier Wilhelm Schroeder. Everyone called me Willie. I was 24 and had been with the Führerbegleitbrigade until they sent me east to reinforce the 116th Panzer Division. I arrived at Lager Eifelblick on December 28, 1944 as part of a replacement draft. The camp was already a graveyard of rumors. The men who had been there longer looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. I was assigned to Block 7, same as the others. The barracks felt heavier than they should have. The air was thick with damp and smoke, and there was always that faint, sour undertone no one talked about. On my second night, I drew patrol duty in the basement level. The basement was used for storing ammunition, medical supplies, and whatever else the quartermaster didn't want freezing in the open. The corridor was narrow, concrete walls slick with condensation. 2 bare bulbs hung from the ceiling, one at each end. They buzzed faintly and cast long, yellow shadows. I was supposed to walk the length of the corridor every 30 minutes, check the padlocks on the ammo lockers, and make sure nothing had shifted. Simple enough. Around 0230 I heard scratching. Not loud, just persistent, like fingernails dragging across concrete. I stopped and listened. The sound came from the far end, near the last ammo locker. I walked slowly toward it, Mauser slung over my shoulder, flashlight in my left hand. The scratching stopped when I was about 10 meters away. Then it started again, softer, like it was trying to be quiet. I reached the end of the corridor. The last bulb flickered once and steadied. On the wall beside the locker, someone had scratched names into the plaster with a bayonet. Dozens of them. Some deep, some shallow. All in the same, uneven handwriting. I recognized several. Lehman, Braun, Kessler. Men who had been reported killed in action weeks earlier. Some as far back as August. Dates were scratched beside each name. Always the date of death. But one name was different. At the very bottom, in fresher scratches, the plaster still pale and powdery, was my name. Wilhelm Schroeder. December 29, 1944. Tomorrow's date. My breath caught. My hands started shaking so badly the flashlight beam danced across the wall. I stared at it for a long time. The date was impossible. I was still alive. I was standing right there. Then the scratching started again, right above my head. Slow, deliberate. Another letter being carved into the concrete. I dropped the flashlight. It hit the floor, rolled, and stopped against the wall. The beam pointed straight at my name. I didn't pick it up. I turned and ran up the stairs, boots pounding on the concrete steps. I didn't stop until I was back in the bunk room. The men were asleep. I stood in the doorway, chest heaving, trying to catch my breath. No one woke up. The next morning, I went to the company clerk, an old Obergefreiter named Muller. I told him what I had seen. I expected him to laugh or tell me I was imagining things. He didn't. He just looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "We've stopped writing them down. It only makes it worse." I asked what he meant. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Every time someone scratches a new name, another one appears the next night. Sometimes two. Sometimes the same name twice. We tried painting over it. The paint flakes off by morning. We tried filling the scratches with mud. It comes back clean." He paused. "Last week someone scratched his own name off the list. The next night it was back, deeper than before. I felt the floor shift under me." Muller looked away. "Don't go back down there, Willie. Just don't. I didn't. But that night, when I tried to sleep, I kept hearing the scratching. Not in the corridor. Inside my head. Slow. Steady. Like someone was carving my name into my skull. I never went near the basement again. None of us did. We started sleeping with our backs to the wall, rifles loaded beside us, just in case. Just in case the wall decided to finish what it had started. Chapter 4. The Man Who Wouldn't Leave. My name is Obergefreiter Erich Muller. I was with the 116th Panzer Division, one of the few who had survived the entire retreat from Normandy without a wound serious enough to send me home. By early February 1945, the Ardennes offensive had collapsed, and what was left of our unit was ordered to fall back toward the Rhine. Most of us left Lager Eifelblick on February 2nd. A small detachment, 15 men, was left behind to guard the remaining supplies until trucks could return from the rear. I was one of them. The camp was almost deserted now. Snow had drifted against the barracks doors, and the wind howled through the pines like distant artillery. We had no heat beyond what we could scrounge from the last coal rations. No hot food, just coffee and cigarettes. We slept in shifts, rifles close, waiting for the trucks that never seemed to come. On the night of February 4th, it snowed harder than I had ever seen. Visibility dropped to 10 meters. The world outside the barracks was nothing but white noise. Around 2,200, we heard knocking at the main gate. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. We froze. No patrol was due back. No one was expected. Feldwebel Braun sent me to check. I grabbed my Karabiner 98K, slung it over my shoulder, and stepped out into the storm. The wind cut through my greatcoat like a knife. I trudged to the gate, boots sinking into fresh snow. There was no one there, just swirling flakes and the dark shapes of the trees. I shone my flashlight around. Nothing. No tracks leading up to the gate. No footprints at all. Then I saw them. Fresh boot prints, size 44, unmistakable, starting right at the gate and leading straight toward Block 7. They were deep, deliberate, as if someone had walked slowly and carefully through the fresh snow. But the prints stopped at the door of the room where Paul Lehmann had died back in August. My stomach dropped. I followed them anyway. The wind was already starting to fill them in, but they were still clear enough to see. I reached the door. It was ajar, just a crack. I pushed it open with the muzzle of my rifle. Inside, the room was dark except for the faint glow from the corridor bulb. Lehmann's old bunk was the one nearest the window. Sitting on it, back turned to me, was a figure in a greatcoat and steel helmet. His shoulders were hunched. He didn't move. I knew that silhouette. Paul? My voice came out hoarse. The figure didn't turn. He spoke without looking at me. Eric, why did you leave me? It was Paul's voice. Exactly as I remembered it. Low, a little rough from too many cigarettes. I felt the rifle slip in my hands. My mouth went dry. I buried you, I said. Near Mortagne. I buried you. The figure shifted slightly. I saw the right sleeve of the greatcoat hanging empty. You left my hand, he said. You all left it. I backed up one step, then another. The figure still didn't turn. I slammed the door shut and ran back through the snow to the main bunk room. I burst in, gasping, snow melting on my face. The men looked up. Braun was on his feet in an instant. What was it? I couldn't speak at first. Finally I managed. Lehmann. He's in the room. Braun didn't question me. He grabbed his MP40 and motioned for 2 others to follow. We went back together. The door was still closed. The boot prints were gone, completely filled in by fresh snow, as if they had never been there. Braun opened the door slowly. The room was empty. Lehmann's bunk was bare. No figure. No greatcoat. Nothing. But on the floor beneath the bunk, in the thin layer of snow that had blown in through the cracked window, was a handprint. Red. Fresh. Like blood pressed into the snow. We stared at it for a long time. No one said a word. We never went near that room again. We barricaded the door with crates and slept in the mess hall for the rest of our time there. The trucks finally arrived 2 days later. We left without looking back. I never told anyone outside the detachment what I saw that night, but I knew the others had seen it too in their own way. Paul Lehmann never left. He was still waiting for the hand we couldn't bring back, and he was patient. Chapter 5. The last night in February. My name is Obergefreiter Friedrich Kessler. I was one of the 15 men left behind at Lager Eifelblick when the main body pulled out on February 2, 1945. We were supposed to guard the remaining ammunition and fuel until transport could return. The trucks were promised within days. They never came. By mid-February, the snow was chest-deep in places. The wind never stopped. We burned anything we could find to keep warm: broken furniture, old crates, even some of the pine branches we chopped from the edge of the forest. We ate cold rations and drank snow-melted over the last working stove. On the night of February 14th, Valentine's Day, though none of us mentioned it, we heard the knocking again. It started at 2,200. 3 slow knocks on the main gate. Pause. 3 more. Then silence. We had heard it before. Every few nights since the first time Eric Muller went to check. Always the same pattern. Always no one there. This time, Feldwebel decided we were done waiting. He gathered us in the mess hall and said, "Tonight we end this. We go out together. We see what's there." No one argued. We were all tired of wondering. We bundled up, grabbed weapons, and stepped into the storm. The wind hit us like a wall. We moved in a tight group, flashlights cutting through the snow. The gate was half buried. We dug it open with our hands and shovels. The knocking had stopped, but the boot prints were there again, fresh, deep, leading straight from the gate to Block 7. The same room. The same door. We followed them. No one spoke. When we reached the door, Braun stopped. He looked at each of us. Then he reached out and pushed it open. The room was empty. Snow had drifted across the floor in a thin layer. Lehman's bunk was bare. The window was cracked open, letting in more snow. But the handprint was back, red, larger this time, pressed into the snow beneath the bunk like someone had knelt there and pushed down hard. The edges were still wet. It hadn't frozen yet. Braun knelt beside it. He touched the edge with his glove. The red came away on the fabric, sticky, metallic. "Blood," he said quietly. We all saw it. We all smelled it. Wet pine, cordite, blood. Then the knocking started again, behind us, at the door we had just come through. We spun around. The door was closed. The knocking came again. 3 slow. Pause. 3 more. Braun raised his MP40. "Open it." One of the younger men, Gefreiter Lang, stepped forward and pulled the door wide. Nothing. Just snow and darkness. But the boot prints outside the door were gone. The snow was smooth, untouched. We backed out of the room slowly. No one turned their back on the doorway. We returned to the mess hall in silence. We barricaded the doors with tables and crates. We sat with weapons across our laps and waited for dawn. Around 0300, the smell came again, stronger than ever. It filled the entire building. The stove flickered and died. Our breath hung in the air. Then we heard it. The dragging sound. Slow. Wet. Coming from the corridor outside the mess hall. We aimed our weapons at the door. No one spoke. We just waited. The dragging stopped right outside. Then a voice, low, cracked, came through the wood. "Gib mir, min Hand Zurich." It was Lehman's voice. Clear. Close. As if he were standing on the other side of the door. Lang whispered, "We should open it." Braun shook his head. "No." The voice came again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Bit, min Hand." We sat there until the first gray light of dawn came through the windows. The smell faded. The dragging stopped. The voice didn't speak again. When the sun rose, we went out. The boot prints were gone. The handprint in the room was gone. The snow outside the door was smooth. We never heard the knocking after that night. 2 days later, the trucks finally arrived. We loaded what we could and left without looking back. We didn't talk about it on the way to the Rhine. We didn't talk about it later. But we all knew. Lehman hadn't left. He was still there, waiting in the snow. And we had left him behind again. Chapter 6. Echoes in the Renovation. My name is Oberfeldwebel Lucas Brandt. I'm with Panzergrenadier Battalion 373, Bundeswehr. In late September 2023, we were tasked with reoccupying the old Lager Eifelblick site for a 2-week winter warfare exercise. The buildings had been abandoned since the mid-1990s. The Bundeswehr had spent 6 months renovating them. New electrical wiring, new plumbing, fresh paint on every wall. Everything was supposed to be clean, modern, safe. It wasn't. The first thing we noticed was the smell. Even before we unpacked, it was there. Wet pine needles, cordite, and something metallic. The NCOs blamed it on the old pine timber or the heating system. We accepted that explanation because we wanted to. On our third night, Gefreiter Jonas Keller came running into the platoon office at 0315. He was pale, shaking, eyes wide. "Sergeant," he said, "there's someone in the corridor." I grabbed my flashlight and followed him out. The corridor was empty. Fresh white paint. New LED lights. Nothing out of place. But on the wall, right at eye level, someone had scratched a name into the paint with something sharp. Paul Lehman. August 16, 1944. The paint was still wet around the edges. Tiny flakes curled away from the letters. We checked the security cameras. Nothing. No one had entered or left the building since lights out. The next morning, I reported it to the company commander. He said it was probably kids who had snuck in during the renovation phase. We painted over it that afternoon. The next week, 3 more names appeared. Same handwriting. Same dates. All from 1944. All in different corridors. All on freshly painted walls. Then Jonas started hearing things. He would wake up in the middle of the night, sit up in his bunk, and listen. He said he heard his name whispered, soft, like someone standing at the foot of his bed. The first time he thought it was one of us messing with him. The second time he wasn't so sure. He requested a psychological evaluation. The doctor wrote it off as stress from the exercise. Jonas didn't argue. He just stopped sleeping much. On October 28th, we ran a full company night exercise. I posted sentries every 50 meters around the perimeter. At 0230, my radio crackled. Echo 1. This is Echo 4. Movement in the trees. Grid 087 to 214. I moved to his position with 2 others. We swept the area. No tracks in the snow. No heat signatures on the thermals. Nothing. But the smell was there, stronger than ever. Wet pine. Cordite. Blood. Then we heard it. A voice from inside the barracks, loud enough to carry across the entire compound. "Gib mir, mein Hand Zurich." It wasn't a whisper this time. It was clear. Angry. Coming from Block 7. Jonas screamed. We ran back. We found him in the main corridor, staring at the wall. A new name had appeared. Fresh scratches through the paint. Lucas Brandt. October 28, 2023. My name. The paint was wet. The edges were still curling. I stared at it. My mouth went dry. The corridor felt colder than it had 5 minutes earlier. I ordered everyone out. We pulled the entire company off the site that night. We didn't wait for dawn. The Bundeswehr never officially reopened the barracks. The exercise was quietly canceled. The site is still listed as under renovation on the internal maps. We don't talk about it much. But every man who was there that night remembers. We remember the smell. We remember the voice. And we remember seeing my name on that wall. Some things don't care about fresh paint. Some things don't care about 78 years. Some things just wait. Chapter 7. The name that shouldn't be there. My name is Feldwebel Lucas Brandt. I've been with Panzergrenadier Battalion 373 for 8 years. I've led men through live-fire exercises in sub-zero temperatures, through night patrols in places where the wind feels like it's trying to tear your face off. I thought I understood fear. I was wrong. After the night of October 28, 2023, when my own name appeared on the freshly painted wall of Block 7, we evacuated the entire company. We didn't wait for orders. We didn't wait for dawn. We packed our gear, loaded the trucks, and left Lager Eifelblick behind. The site was declared off-limits within hours. The Bundeswehr issued a vague statement about structural concerns and ongoing renovation. No one asked questions. No one wanted to. But the stories didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, more names appeared. Not on walls anymore, on doors, on lockers, even on the inside of our own helmets back at the main barracks in Bitburg. Always the same handwriting. Always the same dates. Always from 1944. And always ending with my name, scratched deeper than the rest. Gefreiter Jonas Keller was the first to leave the unit. He requested transfer to a desk job in Koblenz. He said he couldn't sleep unless the lights were on and the door was locked. He said he still heard his name being whispered at night, even after he moved out of the barracks. Oberfeldwebel Muller, the company clerk, started drinking more than he should. He kept a notebook where he wrote down every new name that appeared. He stopped when the list reached 67. He said he didn't want to know what number 68 would be. I tried to stay professional. I tried to tell myself it was mass hysteria, stress, fatigue, anything but what it really was. But on the night of November 3rd, I woke up in my quarters at the main base. The room was freezing. My breath hung in the air. The smell was there, wet pine needles, cordite blood. I sat up. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight outside the window. On the wall above my bunk, scratched into the fresh plaster, was a new line. Lucas Brandt, March 11th, 2023. My name. Today's date. I stared at it until the first light of morning came through the blinds. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched the letters, waiting for them to disappear like they had every other time. They didn't. I took a photo. I showed it to no one. That morning, I went to the battalion commander. I didn't tell him everything. I just said I needed to speak to the chaplain. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. The chaplain listened. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was imagining things. He just said, "Some places hold on to what happened there. Some people carry it with them." He gave me a small cross on a chain and told me to wear it. I still wear it. The names stopped appearing after that night. The smell faded. The whispers stopped. But I know better. I know that somewhere in the Eifel, behind locked gates and under renovation signs, something is still waiting. It waited for Paul Lehmann's hand in 1944. It waited for us in 2023. And it's still waiting. For the next name. For the next soldier who walks into Block 7 and hears the dragging sound in the corridor. For the next man who stands guard at night and feels the cold air change. For the next name scratched into the wall. I don't know whose it will be, but I know it won't be mine. Not yet.